They actually did it. The Baltimore Ravens pulled the trigger. The Ravens have fired longtime head coach, Super Bowl winning head coach, John Harbaugh, and they will be on the lookout. For the first time in a long time, the Baltimore Ravens will be in the head coaching circus, the head coaching carousel. The Baltimore Ravens are searching for a new leader of their football team. Welcome, football fans, ladies, gentlemen, all of you Ravens fans, and of course, all of my jabronis. It's Mitch here. And there's a lot going on in the NFL right now. Coaches are getting fired left and right. I feel like I should be making content about who you should hire, who you should fire, and there's playoffs, there's wild card weekend, there's who you should bet on. There's so much going on right now. It's pretty crazy. I'm trying to cover as much as possible, and we got a lot cooked up here at the Bottom Line View and, of course, on Money Mitch as well. But I felt like this was too big of a topic to pass up. The Baltimore Ravens firing one of the NFL's most successful coaches since 2008. A coach that has 13 playoff victories. A coach that has a Super Bowl championship. A coach that has beat my Patriots not once but twice in the playoffs. A head coach that for a long time was seen as one of the 5 best in the NFL, at the very least a top 10 coach. But I think now was finally the time to pull the trigger on John Harbaugh. And maybe it was a year too late. Harbaugh has been on the hot seat, in my mind, for a few years, with the inability to finish with one of the most talented NFL rosters, with one of the best NFL quarterbacks. John Harbaugh has yet to deliver a championship. And at a certain point, it comes a day where you need to make a change. And a change, I think, is a good thing for the Baltimore Ravens. After going 8-9 this season in 2025-2026, failing to reach the playoffs in a season where, yes, Lamar did get injured and missed a good portion of the season, but so did Joe Burrow. And your main competition, because the Cleveland Browns were completely irrelevant and starting their third-string quarterback for half the season, the Baltimore Ravens' main competition was 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers, and it still came down to one final game, and you could not get it done on the road at Pittsburgh. So what does that tell you about your potential Super Bowl chances, even if you were going to make the playoffs? And you look at John Harbaugh recently. 2019, number 1 seed, Lamar Jackson, MVP, 14-2 season. Juggernaut team. Double-digit favorite. You lose to the Tennessee Titans in your first playoff game. In 2022, you lose your first playoff appearance. In 2020, you get one playoff win against that same Titans team, and then you lose to Buffalo. Not that long after, a few years later, last year, you fumbled a game away, you turn it over, you make mistakes, and you lose to Buffalo again. The Baltimore Ravens in the playoffs have consistently underwhelmed. And maybe the biggest example of that was 2023. When sure, they beat a CJ Stroud rookie Houston Texans team at home. Congratulations. Lamar Jackson was coming off an MVP campaign. You had the number 1 defense in football. You had 2 of the best coordinators in football. You had Mike McDonald as your defensive coordinator. You had a stacked defense. You had a loaded football team. And yet you lose to the Chiefs at home with a chance to go back to the Super Bowl, and you couldn't get it done. So 2 seasons plus, the Ravens have been looked at as favorites. Entering the season, they were Super Bowl favorites, guys. That's how far they fell this year. I looked at them as a Super Bowl contender. I saw the Ravens as a Super Bowl favorite. I saw the Ravens as how could this team possibly not get to the AFC divisional round or championship game? It would be an embarrassment. And I don't care that Lamar got hurt. And I've been sitting here for the last few years saying John Harbaugh needs to go. Because at the end of the day, when we really take a step back, who was the best coach on this staff the last few years? Because to me, it was easily Mike Macdonald. Mike Macdonald leaves to Seattle and he proves that. He proves that. And how many times does John Harbaugh get to change his offensive coordinator or change his defensive coordinator? He's lucky that he went from a borderline Hall of Famer, Joe Flacco, to another borderline Hall of Famer in Lamar Jackson. He's fortunate that the franchise has put together such great rosters and he was able to go from great quarterback or good quarterback, franchise caliber quarterback, to great quarterback and Hall of Famer in Lamar Jackson, 2-time MVP. He's fortunate that he's able to find all these great coordinators. Wink Martindale, Dean Pease, to Mike Macdonald, Greg Roman, to, okay, we're gonna change it up, Todd Monken. And it feels like for a bit there, it works out every single time. But at the end of the day, there's one last man standing that can't get that trophy back to Baltimore, and it's John Harbaugh. It's John Harbaugh. So before I really dive into this, I talk about the candidates that I think Baltimore should pursue, my favorite candidates for this job, who I think they should hire, guys. Make sure to Gronk spike the like button. It helps the Ravens flock, the Ravens fan base, find this video. It helps the YouTube algorithm sort it out to put Mitch on their feed, so make sure to like the video. Also, I'm live, and the reason I'm live here is because I wanted to kind of cover the coaching circus. I wanted to cover the coaching carousel. So if you guys do have some questions, comments, or opinions on the Baltimore Ravens, on the coaching carousel itself, you know, a guy that you want my opinion on, or a team or a situation you want your opinion on or my opinion on, let me know in the comments. Okay? Now, to answer the question, and Baltimore has put out a statement, their ownership, Harbaugh's put out a statement. I 100% agree with this firing. I 1,000% agree with this firing. The Baltimore Ravens, since 2018, since Lamar became their quarterback, have won double-digit games 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times out of 8 seasons. The 2 seasons that they didn't win double-digit games, Lamar was injured. Okay? In both years. This past year and in 2021. Since Lamar has become the starter, they have 3 playoff wins. Only 3. Since 2018. What do we see after every draft, guys? An A or an A+ for the draft grade, for the draft class of the Baltimore Ravens, do we not? A+, A+, A, B+. How many times have we seen that? How many studs have they brought to this team? How many studs? Okay? So we look at that, and Lamar is not the problem, ST, whatever your name is, because before Lamar Jackson got to the team, 2015, no playoffs. 2016, no playoffs. 2017, no playoffs. Okay? Sometimes a coach's level of prominence wears out and dies and falters. This is what's happened to Harbaugh. Harbaugh got this job for his leadership skills and for his special teams acumen and for his ability to lead a team. John Harbaugh is not a special offensive coach. He's not an offensive coach. John Harbaugh is not even a defensive coach, despite all the great defenses he's had. He's been very blessed by the defensive staffs and players he has been a part of. When you really look at what Harbaugh was able to do at the beginning of his career, you look at the rosters that he was given. You look at the level of talent. Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, Terrell Suggs, Haloti Ngata, These are Hall of Fame level defenders. His defenses at the beginning of his career were stellar, time after time after time. And yeah, whether you believe Joe Flacco isn't a Hall of Famer or not, I don't think he's a Hall of Famer, but he's definitely a Hall of Very Good. And he was given a good quarterback from the very start in 2008. And they always had great offensive lines. And they always had great defenses. And they could always run the football. Right? So I kind of feel like Harbaugh has always been a great culture builder, a great leader, and he's given the team an edge in the special teams department. But I've never seen John Harbaugh as a brilliant schemer. And I think that's come to burn them every single time when it comes to the last few years. They've been outcoached in big games against Mike Vrabel, against Sean McDermott, against Andy Reid. They've been out-schemed a lot of these games. Not out-talented, not outplayed, out-schemed, out-coached, period. And you look at, like, just take, for example, they were what? The Super Bowl favorite before the year? The second Super Bowl favorite? And they finished 8-9? I don't know what excuse you have for that. They lost one of their players. One player. They lost their D tackle, Justin Namdi Matabike, whatever his first name is nowadays, for this season. Outside of that, they lost Lamar for a good stretch of the year. But look at Kyle Shanahan. He won like 6 games with Mac Jones. So I don't think you can have these excuses. It's not like Snoop Huntley went in there and played poorly. In fact, he beat the Packers and he beat the Bears. Harbaugh couldn't do it. And Lamar's been a 2-time MVP, and it's not because of anything Harbaugh does. Harbaugh doesn't coach the offense. Harbaugh doesn't call the plays. If anything, right, Lamar and Allen are similar, where both their coaches have nothing to do with their side of the ball. So you can't really give, oh yeah, Lamar's been great, that's all me. No, it's not. It's not. Right? Like it's Todd Monken. It's Greg Roman. Give those guys the credit. The talent around those players. You know? So I kind of feel like Harbaugh and McDermott have been in a similar situation for the last few years, where it's like they've been given this all-time quarterback. And their situation is, it's unfair, but it's true. You've got to win a Super Bowl. Like, you better win a Super Bowl. Because this window with Lamar and this window with Allen is only so long. This prime of these extremely athletically gifted quarterbacks is only going to last so long, and you've got to take advantage of it. You've got to take advantage of it. And Harbaugh, to me, he doesn't bring an edge on Sundays to defense or to offense. In fact, what would this team be if they had Mike Macdonald as their head coach? What are the Ravens doing? What are they saying to themselves right now in their front office, in their ownership meetings? If we had Mike Macdonald, we might be in the playoffs. We wouldn't be outcoached by Mike Tomlin. Certainly not. And that's not even Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan or Andy Reid offensive mind. That's a defensive coach. They might have given away the coach of the year. The guy that's the number 1 seed in the NFC, because they kept this old guy. They kept this old guy that hasn't done anything in the playoffs. You look at who they beat. Who have they beat in the playoffs lately, guys? Who? The CJ Stroud, rookie CJ Stroud? Who have they beat? The Titans with Ryan Tannehill? Who? So, I don't know. Harbaugh hasn't had success in the playoffs since he really won the Super Bowl. Guys, since 2014, John Harbaugh has 4 playoff wins with Lamar Jackson and Joe Flacco. This isn't even like Mike Tomlin where it's like, I have Duck Hodges. No, I have Lamar Jackson, 2-time MVP, Figure it out. Stop choking. So yes, Lamar hasn't been spectacular in the playoffs. But what if he had a great offensive coach? Maybe he would be spectacular in the playoffs. Ever think about that for a second? Just saying. Now, when it comes to the candidates here, and also, before we get to the candidates, I got to say one more thing. Harbaugh, how many times has he lost a lead over the last few years? He leads the league in losing leads with the best run game in the league. How do you lose leads when you have Derrick Henry? How? I don't know, but he keeps doing it. So at a certain point, yes, he's been a great coach. He might be a Hall of Fame coach. 13 playoff wins, a Super Bowl appearance, multiple AFC Championship appearances. He might be a Hall of Fame coach. But his time in Baltimore had to be over because he was not getting it done. Now, 100, 1,000, 1,000,000%, the Ravens should keep Lamar Jackson. Don't even ask that question. We've got a question, should they hire Cliff? Cliff is an interesting candidate. I do not understand why the Commanders fired Cliff today. Now, maybe someone was fired through this. Maybe that's why, Baltimore took a couple extra days to think about it. Maybe someone was fired, like Kevin Stefanski, that maybe the Ravens want, or Cliff Kingsbury that the Ravens want. I don't know. But all the Ravens knew is that they needed to try something different. And sometimes, even if it doesn't work out, trying something different is the right move. Because we have now seen the ceiling with John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson. We need something different. And that's my same deal with Sean McDermott and Josh Allen, okay? Let's see if Josh Allen and Sean McDermott can do it this year, which I don't think they will. We can also talk about where Harbaugh will go as well, if you guys have any questions there. Now, let's run through some candidates. Cliff Kingsbury was brought up in the chat, so let's bring that up. I think Cliff Kingsbury would be a great fit from an offensive standpoint. I don't see him as a Baltimore head coach. I don't see him fitting that model, that archetype, right? But I do think Lamar in that offense would be spectacular. Jaden Daniels, right, was in that offense, and I think Lamar is basically a better version of Jaden Daniels. With the talent that the Ravens have, I do feel like that would be pretty potent. But I honestly don't know if offensive coaching is necessarily the need here, because I think that Todd Monken has been a pretty darn solid offensive coordinator. I don't think that Todd Monken was great this year, but I don't think he's been necessarily below average or anything. But Kingsbury, I think, would be a great fit with the spread system, the air raid system with Lamar Jackson. That would be very fun to watch. The thing with Cliff Kingsbury would be overseeing an entire team again. The questions about him when it comes to can he handle being a leader of the offense, the play caller of the offense, and then also being a head coach. Because he has succeeded as an OC at a high level. But as a head coach, he had some moments with the Cardinals. He brought Kyler Murray to the playoffs once or twice, right? But it wasn't anything special. I think that with Lamar, it would certainly be a lot of fun. I do wonder, though, if that's a championship formula. I question that. I think that it would be a good hire. I'd be excited about it. Do I think it would lead to a Super Bowl? I don't know. I would wonder about what the rest of the staff looks like. But I do think that the system offensively would be a great fit with Lamar. The two candidates that I think would be the best hires for the Ravens are two defensive minds. And I know that sounds backwards to a lot of Ravens fans because I think the purpose is to hire, an offensive play caller for Lamar. But guys, when we really look at it, like, the offense hasn't been the problem the last couple of years. If anything, it's been the defense. And if anything, they just need a schematical edge on one side of the ball. Monken and Lamar already give them an edge on offense. That's not really the problem, right? Defensively, they have lost something when they lost Mike Macdonald. Their schematical edge in 2023 was from Mike Macdonald. That's what made that team special. It was the combination of Lamar Jackson being awesome, elite at quarterback, and a brilliantly schemed defense. So to me, there's two candidates that stand out. First of all, Brian Flores feels like a Baltimore Ravens head coach. He feels like a Ravens coach. And what I've always thought the Ravens was a physical team that can run the ball, that can beat you up, that can punch you in the face. And what I picture when I picture the Ravens is great defense. And I think Brian Flores could bring great defense back to Baltimore in a way that we haven't seen in the last couple of years. And I think he would bring an attitude. And I think he would bring just something that's been missing, about an edge that's been missing from the Ravens. I don't think anyone would want to go to Baltimore and play the Ravens defense with Brian Flores there. And Singh, as a Ravens fan, says, I think Flores goes to the Raiders because Brady is there. Here's the thing. Would Brian Flores rather go to Baltimore with Lamar Jackson, Singh, or the Raiders with no one? If Brian Flores has the opportunity to go to Baltimore, Baltimore just became the number one spot for anyone that wants a coaching job. Anyone that wants to be a head coach, number one is Baltimore. They have a great ownership. They have great general managing. They always have great rosters. They have an elite quarterback. They're already established. Now, sure, there's pressure in Baltimore that doesn't exist in Tennessee. But it's still by far the best situation that you could possibly be in out of the other situations, right? So to me, Brian Flores, I think he is arguably the best defensive coordinator in football. He's constantly setting trends on the defensive side of the ball. His teams play with physicality and toughness. And when you do look at his track record as a head coach, and you actually go back and look at what he was able to do in Miami, first of all, he was right about Tua. The reason he got fired is because of friction between him and the general manager. The GM was always a jabroni to begin with. But second, he was right about Tua. He didn't want Tua. He wanted Herbert. And what happened there? But you look at the last 2 years with Flores. 10-6 and 9-8 in Miami. 10-6 and 9-8 in Miami. 2020 and 2021. And since then, what has Flores done? Right? You look at what he's done with Minnesota. 2024, last year, they were an elite defense. They had the most interceptions in the league. Last season, they were number 3 in, what were they? Hold on. They were top 5 in points allowed. And this year, they were 7th in points allowed, despite terrible quarterback play on the other side, and 3rd in yards allowed. The last 2 years, Minnesota has had awesome defenses. The year before, remember in 2022 in Minnesota how bad they were on defense? They were the worst defense in the league. He took that defense to 2023, and he made them a above average unit. They were 13th in points allowed. So every year they've actually kind of gotten better. And he's setting trends on defense. You even go back to look at what he did in Miami on defense. And in 2019, they were the worst defense statistically in the league when he got there. And he elevated them to a top 10 unit. So he is obviously a great defensive coordinator. 2018, he was the defensive coordinator of the Patriots. He won the Super Bowl. And he demolished the Rams in that Super Bowl. So you look at what Flores has done since 2018 as a defensive coach. He's clearly been top 5 in that category since 2018. And he's already been a head coach. He has experience as a head coach. And he's actually been pretty good as a head coach. He was fired after a 9-8 season because of behind the scenes stuff, right? Then we have another candidate, Jesse Minter of the Los Angeles Chargers. Jesse Minter feels like the obvious pick because he is Jim Harbaugh's understudy. And the Ravens, as much as they just let go of John Harbaugh, right? They love the Harbaughs. They respect the Harbaughs. And how many times has John Harbaugh stolen someone from Jim Harbaugh? How many times have the Ravens stolen someone from Michigan or something, right? Mike McDonald's an example. They stole Mike McDonald from Michigan. Jesse Minter is a guy that I really like. Jesse Minter is at the forefront right now of, I think, coverage schemes, defensive schemes in the NFL. He's been the defensive coordinator for the Chargers since Harbaugh took over the last 2 years. His defenses have finished very, very highly in pass defense when you look at how they look against the pass, when you look at how they finished against points, and yards allowed. They've been in the top half of the league, even top 10. So Minter has already provided he's a very good defensive coach, very smart coach. He also has a very good presence and leadership about him. And if the Ravens were looking for the next Mike McDonald, it would be Jesse Minter, in my opinion. He has a lot of similarities to Mike McDonald. Similar presence, similar energy, youthful, 42 years old, came from Michigan, coached at Michigan, coached under Jim Harbaugh, same deal. Jesse Minter would be a great choice in my opinion. I talked about Cliff Kingsbury. The next one would be Kevin Stefanski, who they know up close and personal from inside the division. Kevin Stefanski is a 2-time Coach of the Year. The biggest thing with Kevin Stefanski that I think people get wrong about Kevin Stefanski is that he had to coach in Cleveland. And in Cleveland, there is a lot of garbage that you have to withstand, including your general manager randomly trading for a criminal and then signing him to the biggest contract known in the history of football, and then just asking you to make it work, even though that guy is terrible at football in Deshaun Watson. So Kevin Stefanski has been through the absolute ringer in Cleveland. Now, in the mix there, he's had some really bad years, but he's also had some really good years, especially considering where he's had those good years. Cleveland. His first season, he turned the Cleveland franchise around to an 11-5 team, right? He also, in 2023, took Joe Flacco off the couch and made the playoffs at 11-6. Those are his 2 Coach of the Year seasons, including being the only Cleveland coach to win a playoff game since Bill Belichick in the early 1990s. So Kevin Stefanski has proven enough there. He has a very strong offensive scheme that does a lot of the stuff that I think a lot of people look for: play action, strong run game, quarterback movement inside the play action game. I feel like the last couple of years, his drop back passing game has gotten stronger. He's had to layer his offense because of the whole experience with multitude of quarterbacks, from Baker Mayfield to Kirk Cousins to Joe Flacco to Jacoby Brissett, and he's proven to be good with a lot of these guys. He's had to work with Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel, younger guys this year that haven't really worked out, but some of them have, right? So he's kind of been screwed over by the front office and the ownership of Cleveland. He does usually pick good coaches around him, like Jim Schwartz, and has put together good staffs. And I feel like he's maximized a lot of the talent on offense that he's been given. I don't think Cleveland has always given him the best situation to work with. And he's had very little responsibility in the general manager stuff. What I don't like about Kevin Stefanski is I do kind of feel he's a little soft. He's a little shy. And I think because of that, he's been walked over in Cleveland. But I do feel in a situation like Baltimore, where they're a lot more responsible. They're a lot more correctly run. Like, they're actually well run. And so I don't think that Stefanski is going to have to deal with the drama and the BS that he had to deal with in Cleveland that I don't think he handled particularly well. Like, I still don't think he wanted to draft Shedeur Sanders, for example, or even play him for that matter. But, of course, the owner did. You know, so that's part of it too. So Stefanski's one of those guys that I could see, like, he was in a really bad spot, but he's done some really good things. Somewhere else, he might be better and more sustainable and consistent as a head coach. So the main three that I like for the Ravens is Brian Flores, Jesse Minter, and Kevin Stefanski. After that, I think Cliff Kingsbury is interesting. I think that Chris Shula is interesting, but I don't have enough track record with him yet. But I do like his personality, and I think he's doing some good things with the Rams defense. Clint Kubiak, I don't love as much as others. I feel like Clint Kubiak is just like kind of vanilla. Like, I don't think his offense is as good as people think. I think it's just a basic version of Kyle Shanahan's, and I don't see the advantage to that. Like, if I were the Ravens, I'd take one of these brilliant defensive guys. You know, strong personalities, strong culture guys. Flores, Minter, give you a defensive schematical edge, partner that up with Lamar Jackson, and go for it. You already got an edge on offense. Go for the defensive scheming, and then that's how you beat Patrick Mahomes. That's how you beat Drake May and Josh Allen in the playoffs and Joe Burrow in your division. It's going to be through defense and through Lamar taking care of his end. That's I think, the play for Baltimore. There's no Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan on the market right now. There's no Ben Johnson out there. So you're not going to find that type of guy, right? The best you could find on offense is probably Stefanski or Cliff. And I don't think those guys are giving you the edge over some of these other offensive guys like Andy Reid. I don't see that. Right? There's some other candidates out there, Matt Nagy, Steve Spagnuolo, Mike McCarthy, Brian Daboll, retreads that I don't necessarily see as great candidates for a top-tier job like the Ravens. Why hire those guys, and why not just keep John Harbaugh? You know what I mean? Another interesting one is Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh I could also see in Baltimore. I was never a huge Robert Saleh as a head coach with the Jets guy, but I do think that Saleh is a really good personality. And again, like Stefanski was in a terrible, terrible situation, was working for the Jets. He's a good defensive coach. I wouldn't say he's like Brian Flores, but I think he's a good defensive coach, and he's got a really good personality. And that might be interesting too. So I think that's interesting. But out of the guys that you would hire, I think it's Brian Flores. I think it's Jesse Minter. I think it's Kevin Stefanski. I think those are the guys that you would look at if you're the Ravens. So those are the candidates, guys. If you have any questions about the coaching cycle, let me know. Currently, I'm working on ranking my NFL playoff teams, ranking my NFL playoff quarterbacks. I'm trying to, look at some of the games that have been played earlier in the year to try to get my playoff predictions down and all my playoff picks for tomorrow. Got some Bleacher Report stuff coming. So, the daddy to your daddy says, "Yo, Mitch, big fan. My sis wants to marry you." All right, that sounds good. Tell her to just, DM me, okay? We'll work it out. We'll get the wedding all scheduled, okay? Don't worry about it. Let her know. I'm a depressed, thank you so much for the super chat. I'm a depressed Detroit fan, says, who should the Lions hire for offensive coordinator? If you guys have any questions like that, let me know. That's a good one. Okay, so I think you need somebody that can work with Jared Goff, because I don't think Jared Goff is going anywhere anytime soon. I think Matt Nagy is kind of interesting. I know you don't really want to hear that. Matt Nagy might not want to leave the Chiefs, though, but I think Matt Nagy would be interesting. He brings his own ideas from Kansas City. I think he did actually a pretty good job with Mitch Trubisky and the Bears when you look back at it and what he was dealing with. That's an interesting one. I don't think Cliff fits because I just don't think he runs the right system for Jared Goff. Kevin Stefanski, I think, would be ideal if he were to be an OC, but he's probably going to be a head coach. I do really like Brian Daboll as an offensive coordinator. Who else? I don't know if there's like younger guys out there that I'm not aware of. Like, I don't know some of these guys. Like, there might be a guy in San Francisco that you would want, or a guy in like LA or something like that, but like a receiver coach that I don't really know how great of a coach they are. Those guys are often the best hires. Or the guys that like, I would have to like interview them and see, you know what I'm saying? Like the wide receiver coach of the Dolphins might be like amazing or something. I don't know. But I would say for the realistic possibilities, depressed Detroit fan, out of the guys that I know, Daboll and Matt Nagy. Those would be the ones that stand out. Because I don't think Stefanski, you know what I'm saying? Mike McDonald's not leaving, so that's not a possibility. The best offensive coach on the market is probably Cliff, but again, I don't think he's a fit for what you guys want to do. Also, I'd maybe look at New England has a couple guys. Thomas Brown's kind of interesting from New England. He was in Chicago last year. And he took over, I think, the team at some point last year, if I'm not mistaken. He might get some looks. But yeah, Daboll will be a good hire, I think, for any team. He seems like a guy that he could be like Brian Flores' potential OC or something. I wouldn't be surprised by that. Do I see Kevin Stefanski going to Philly as OC? No, unless that's the only job. Unless he's not going to get a head coach job, maybe. Lamar will be a Viking. All right. Who do you want to win the Super Bowl if it isn't the Pats? The 49ers. If it's not the 49ers, the Bills. Grover brought up Mike McCarthy earlier. I don't think that makes sense. That feels like a lateral move. For the Ravens. For Harbaugh, where could Harbaugh go? So let's talk about that. So the head coaching openings, I think Harbaugh is going to get hired. He's just too successful as a head coach. If he wants to be hired, unless he wants to take a year off like Sean Payton. Sean Payton technically retired, but so who are the teams that are available? We've got the Falcons, the Giants, the Browns, the Raiders, the Titans, and the Cardinals. So let's break it down team by team. Arizona. High draft pick. Don't really have a quarterback. He could keep Kyler if he wanted, but they could trade Kyler. Harbaugh's a little older. Does he want to work with that? I don't think Arizona is a terrible ownership or front office. They're just a little confused. I think Arizona would definitely benefit from an established head coach and a guy that knows what he's doing. The last time Arizona was successful was with Bruce Arians, who to me was never a great head coach, but at least he knew what he was doing. Tennessee could also benefit from a guy that knows what they're doing. Tennessee has one of the worst ownerships in football, though. I don't think Harbaugh would be attracted to that job. I think Tennessee is going to be looking for an offensive coach to partner up with their young quarterback, Cam Ward. I don't think they'll be looking for a guy like Harbaugh, personally. Las Vegas, it wouldn't make a lot of sense, although I'm sure Brady respects Harbaugh. I kind of feel like going from Pete Carroll to Harbaugh would essentially be doing the same thing. I don't really think that makes a lot of sense, personally. Cleveland is interesting. Because Cleveland kind of needs a coach to come in and just like fix stuff and like fix the culture. If I was Cleveland, I would be intrigued by Harbaugh. But the problem with Cleveland is that Andrew Berry is still there. And does Harbaugh want to have a GM that he's not comfortable with and that already has the sway of the owner? I don't think so. So rule Cleveland out. Atlanta and New York are the two possibilities, and Arizona, I would say, for Harbaugh. Atlanta does have a strong owner, although he's a little confused. He made a mistake last time in his hiring cycle, but I feel like Atlanta has kind of given their coaching a lot of opportunity. It's just that they haven't been able to come through with it. Atlanta has a really talented roster already. Atlanta, you get to choose your GM. Atlanta, they've got a lot of money. And they don't have a first-round pick this year, but you would be given a leeway and like a grace period to figure out your quarterback position. You do already have Bijan. You do have Drake London. You got a strong defense with a lot of young talent. It's an easy division with not a lot of great coaching in that division either. So if I was Harbaugh, Atlanta would be really, really appealing. And then the Giants, I think, makes the most sense because the Giants have well-regarded ownership. It's a big city that needs an established coach that's won a lot, or else they'll be frustrated and they'll be panicking and they'll be on the radio talking about, hey, who is this guy, like this Jamoke that we're hiring? We need a guy that's won a Super Bowl, right? So Harbaugh, I think, would appeal to the fan base. Second, they do have talent established on, offense and defense. Malik Neighbors. Jackson Dart, I don't know if I'm a big believer, but he seems to pass the bar of he could be good enough. Defensively, they've got a really strong front seven. Some promising players. Dexter Lawrence in his prime. Abdul Carter. Brian Burns in his prime. They've got enough talent there. They've got a high draft pick. And I think, also, Harbaugh's special teams background is also similar to Bill Belichick's. And the Giants love Bill Belichick. So I do think there is something there too. So I think the Giants are probably number one. The Falcons would be number two. And then Arizona would be number three. Pitts is about to leave for a bag, though. I wouldn't be surprised if Travis Swift retires and Pitts goes to Kansas City. Yes, Pitts is probably going to leave. But I don't know if that's a huge deal, although, he was really good at the end of the year. I think having Bijan and Drake London and a pretty good offensive line and a pretty good defense is good enough. Louis says, Mitch, who do you think will go to Baltimore? I kind of already talked about this, brother. You might have to rewind. I think my number one choice, if I was Baltimore, would be Flores. My number one choice. But I don't think he'd be their number one. I think their number one is Jesse Minter, personally. Then after that, I think it would be between Stefanski and probably Kubiak. Saleh would be right after that. That would be my top five for who I think they would hire. Alex says, would Raheem Morris be a good option as a DC to replace Zach Orr? You know who would be the best option? Would be, if Flores is not available. The best option would be actually Atlanta's defensive coordinator, Ulbrich, not their head coach. One of the best coordinator hires this offseason would be Jeff Ulbrich. I thought he was great with Atlanta this year. Great. Another one, quietly, I don't know if he's staying in Cleveland or not, so I'm not really sure, but Jim Schwartz. I kind of want him to be in New England because he worked with Vrabel before. I don't think the Patriots would lose a game if we had Jim Schwartz as our defensive coordinator. So, Jim Schwartz is also another that I think that's a really strong hire as a coordinator. Jim Schwartz and Jeff Ulbrich. Two guys that I really like on defense. Raheem Morris, he would be on the list. I think he's at least solid as a defensive coach. He's solid. Like, he would upgrade a number of teams. I would put it that way. I don't think he's brilliant, though. I don't think he's like difference-making level defensive coordinator. Louis says, how do I feel about Todd Monken being promoted? I guess that could happen. The question is, does that make you better? And to me, it doesn't. Like, I don't like promoting coaches because what does it do? Inherently, you fired a good coach. He was your head coach for a reason, right? John Harbaugh was your head coach for a reason, was he not? He's a good coach. So why fire a guy, then hire the same guy that was already there, and then hire a lesser coach to do something else? You know what I'm saying? So to me, the better move would be, let's hire Jesse Minter or Brian Flores. Let's make our defense awesome. Let's keep Todd Monken as our offensive coordinator. And let's roll. That would be my play, but that's just me. But I definitely think that Orr should be gone regardless of who they hire. Funky Lines fan says, I loved when Jim Shorts was the head coach here. Team played with a serious attitude. I've never heard that one before. What if Todd Monken leaves? He could. I don't think so, but he could. If the only situation is, well, Todd's going to go somewhere else. He's going to go to Cleveland. He's going to go to Tennessee. If we don't hire him as our head coach, then that becomes a discussion. Then we have to think about it, right? But depends. I don't think that's... I don't think it would be a bad hire for Todd Monken if that was the only choice. I would say that. All right. Anything else, guys? Gronk spiked the like button. I gotta go do some more stuff, make some more videos. Playoffs are here. So we got our picks tomorrow, guys. Reminder, I will be live for every single NFL playoff game. I'm going to be ranking my playoff teams tonight, and I'll release that later. Thanks for watching. Gronk spiked the like button. Subscribe. We'll see you later. Peace.